Panel. Thanks to Alicia and three panelists in the session that we've just had, and you can tell from the interaction in the room that people are glad to have the chance to be together and stimulated by what we're hearing. I'm sure that's to continue. And Pam Montgomery will be the moderator of our further panel, so I'll turn it over to Pam. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier McLaughlin. Good morning, and I hope everybody enjoyed the first panel session. The topic we're going to talk about in this session is place and growth. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Executive Director with Downtown Summerside. So place and growth and development of places and growth are pretty near and dear to my heart and a cause we're pretty passionate about. I am, and I think this is a t-shirt slogan, a true-born Islander. Born and raised in Summerside, I've spent the majority of my life there, but I've had great opportunity to work with my family's business and engage and meet people in different areas all across the province. And now being the Executive Director with Downtown Summerside, I get to meet great people every day. And I know that for us to grow and sustain the growth in our great places, that people are what we need to do and develop. So with, no further ado and no need to talk more about myself, I'll have our panel introduce themselves, starting with David Dunphy.
David Dunphy here, currently Mayor of the town of Stratford. Just a bit of background, I'm a rural boy from Morel, PEI, and found my way into town, went to University of PEI, of course, and got my postgraduate CA designation. I see Rick Kennedy here, a fellow CA here, and it's good to see people like Rick involved. And for those that don't know the CA profession, we're out to take over the world, and so we're doing our part, Rick? Been working in business basically my whole adult life. Currently work for Eastlink for the last 25, 26 years. Previously Island Cable. Previous to that, I worked in the fishing business when there was groundfish on the island. And so I've got a bit of a business background, and now I find myself in government, trying to sort of navigate through municipal government, and so I'm enjoying that, and there's lots of challenges in that area for sure, and so that's basically my background.
Hi, I'm Audrey Schillebeer. Can you hear me? Too loudly? I'm Audrey Schillebeer, and I grew up rurally too, only it was in Alberta. And I also have a background in small business because my family had a pharmacy when I was growing up, so I cut my teeth on small business there. I then went on to have my own small business in a small town. And then when circumstances happened, I needed to go back to school or go to school for the first time. And I went into the University of Alberta to study Canadian Studies. I completed that degree and was asked to go on and do a political science grad degree, which I did. From there, I worked for 4 levels of government, and some of them I couldn't sleep at night after working with them. So I decided that maybe government wasn't for me. It's a hard job. And I turned to community development and in small rural areas, my passion, and working with not-for-profits. I met in a small town my husband Ian McPherson and at the Chamber of Commerce. His family is from PEI originally, and the McPhersons were invited down to a family reunion in 2002. We came and fell in love with the place, and then bought a place as a summer home, and then couldn't ever leave it to go back to work, so we decided to move here permanently, which we did in 2009. Since then, I've been working with the Belfast Historical Society, with the Belfast Community Development Group, and most recently now, currently, with the Wood Islands and Area Development Corporation. We're working on a big project, which I would like to jump into, but maybe John should be introduced first. I'd really like to tell you about the project because it's something odd enough that you need to hear it, what it is, so that we can even talk about it.
My name's John Kimmel, and I'm the Managing Director and Co-founder of Thin Air for clients like gaming company people spend and when. I'm not when I came out to do my undergrad at the University of King's College, and decided that liberal.
He intended that the Belfast settlement would be a model for future settlements and for the immigration plans of other men of his day. Recognizing that Selkirk's vision and leadership were hallmarks of the man and that courage emboldened those early Belfast settlers, the Belfast Historical Society is returning to those virtues, the best leg leave, honoring Selkirk and his vision. Then, to galvanize a community development and change and to develop a plan. So, the Umbrella Committee will then be comprised first of the Belfast Historical Society, and representatives from the other community groups will rise or send a representative up to the Umbrella Committee, and we will together develop and promote the Big Belfast brand. Our plan is focused on the creative economy. I haven't heard any talking about that, but that's very much our focus. It is a thing, the creative economy. Richard Florida has written some books about it, and it does have some detractors, but I really like it for PEI. And we're also focusing on smart technology, which again is a thing. We recognize that developing creative relationships, that is to say recruiting people, is the most important action of any model of rural development. Jane Jacobs, in her book, The Nature of Economies, teaches us to focus our economy and development on the people, not things. Our project is a very modern plan that will brand the area so that we are distinctive and attractive. If we do not do things differently, we will not succeed. We all know that we can't solve a problem using the same kind of thinking that got us there in the first place. So this is a big picture, long-term, forward-thinking plan. Now is not the time for us for the usual thinking, quick, short-sighted, or completely designed band-aids. So to reiterate, the model rural community that will be Big Belfast is being envisioned with 21st century eyes and in response to 21st century real challenges faced on PEI. We, the descendants of those First Lord Selkirks, want to create our rural reality in 2017 and beyond. We want to be policy makers, not takers. We take ownership of our future. As our forefathers and mothers did over 200 years ago, we step up to lead the way in challenging times. So the question was something about working together.
How do we better leverage, fantastic example, leverage
Right.
our strengths to
One
grow
of
our
the
places?
things that we see, that we talk about in our group is, and I haven't heard it here yet, and I'm not sure if it's an idea that most people know about, convenient co-developments is what they're called. And up west, we have a culture of cooperatives, and I am a big fan of cooperatives. But down east, we have been more individualistic. In Big Belfast, we are modeling convenient co-developments, which again is a Jane Jacobs idea from her book, The Nature of Economies. I'll give you an example. Given our Big Belfast brand, we anticipate these convenient co-developments in our community because sectors, these components, will sign on to the plan, and they will have reviewed our shared guiding principles. Those guiding principles and the plan will help align us, and we will give each other a leg up in business. For example, the Belfast Mini Mills sells yarn made from its sheep, commissioned yarn from your dog's fur, yarn from the fur of northern yaks, but it also sells incredible mini mills all over the world with which to process the wool. It builds those mini mills right in our community too. So a convenient co-development of that now is another new business called Fleece and Harmony. They bought one of the mills from the Belfast Mini Mills, and with the Belfast Mini Mills' help, now produces yarn from PEI lamb producers only. And so then in a further convenient co-development, lamb producers now gain a market for the wool shorn from their meat lambs before they go to market. Co-developments build economies when you think relationally rather than competitively.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I don't usually take notes, but I figured this will make it slightly easier for everyone to understand. people and places grow. I think, just as a top line note, I think federal government's too big to be able to do a lot of the stuff on the ground. So they're off to the side. Opportunities that we're not even taking advantage of because maybe we're not thinking about it, or we're just happy to do the things that we can do. Sometimes that's the struggle of running a business, is the things that are in front of us. Companies should be responsible for communicating what our needs are. We need to be as loud as possible. I'm going to say right here, right now, whatever the internet strategy is for this province, I want fiber that everyone is going to listen. We need to do that. And we need to do that in a lot of different ways. And we need to talk about the kinds of employees we need and the kinds of training and the kinds of connections that we can use to put them together as entrepreneurs. And we need to look at this sort of monitored concept of growth is a brand. So what do we need to do? We need to build those connections that allow perspective, that allow islanders who haven't had the chance to travel as extensively as some of us have, to see what the world is like outside, to bring that experience back, whether it's for a week or a month or a year or 6 years. How many great chefs do we make in this province that never get a chance to leave and see what real Spanish tapas is like and then bring it back? Because I would love really great Spanish tapas. How do we growth hack that? I've got frequent flyer points. Can we put a chef on a plane? And at the end of the day, I think that we have this agility and we have this opportunity. We can spare a little bit of volatility. We, in our industry, use something called A/B testing. And you've probably heard about this technique where someone's changed the color of a button in a shopping cart from pink to green. They've doubled sales. Well, that's not what we're going to do. But I think we should be willing to go out there and say, we don't need a 5-year plan for something. What's something we can do now with 3 entrepreneurs or 5 companies or 10 students or a graduating class? What's the thing that we want to try, and how are we going to measure it? And what can we turn around in 26 weeks? Or a year. And if that doesn't work, how can we iterate? The easiest way that we fix problems in our business is we don't run 1 test, we run 10 tests. We run 100 tests. 1 test might be the one that fixes it. 90 of them might not work, but you're never going to find the one if you don't run the 100. It's like printing lottery tickets. So at the end of the day, agility and opportunity. I know I'm taking way too much time, and I'll just wrap up with this example. If you've been to Toronto, Queen West, you've probably been to the Drake Hotel. It's a lovely bar, it's a lovely restaurant, a boutique hotel as well. They have the Drake General Store, where they sell lots of overpriced merchandise. And wasn't I surprised to pop in, I guess 2 years ago, before I moved to PEI, but I was familiar with McCausland's Woolen Mills, and these beautiful blankets that had the tags cut off with the Drake Hotel's logo on them. $200 for blankets that that you can buy, or you can pick up the phone, and I forget, it's called Pat, I guess, and you can buy it for $44. And some enterprising entrepreneur had bought as many blankets as they could and cut off the tags and put their own tags on and marked them up 400% and just kept selling out. So I think that if we talk about A/B testing and volatility and agility, this is getting someone who's a university student who knows a little bit about social media and has a hair up their butt about doing something with sales and putting a really great web sales platform out there in front of them, connecting the amazing products that every islander already makes with a global economy. And that's something that scales with every single thing that's being done in this province, and it's just technology, and it's someone saying, what can we do next? What's that opportunity? So.
Awesome, thanks, John. Does anybody else have any comment on what we can do better together to leverage our strengths in our region and our areas to make our places grow? You guys are a tough audience. Okay. Next question. This relates to the earlier panel's discussion. What are some things that we can do better to deepen our culture of entrepreneurship in our places, especially in focus with our youth? From my perspective, where I sit in downtown Summerside, one of the key pieces that we're missing in the conversations in developing entrepreneurs is how do we succeed a business, and what does succession planning look like? There's opportunities that people are looking to leave or succeed, and people who would like to get into them, but to create that conversation and match those people together is a little bit of a challenge, and I think it might be part of our culture in PEI to not want to talk about that a great deal. However, it's opportunity that exists and something that we need to address, particularly with our youth coming forward. So on that note, David, if you have thoughts on how we can deepen our culture of entrepreneurship?
Sure. First of all, I think it all starts with education. Education is critical to the success of all of our workforce. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, a lot of people don't hear about entrepreneurship in school, even university, unless you're business courses. But I think we have to cultivate a sense that people can be entrepreneurs, can be self-employed, can start their own businesses. And then, with our chambers of commerce are doing great work in the area of entrepreneurship. They're taking on the responsibility, I'd say, or the sort of the torch of trying to drive the economy and the Island Advance, which the Chambers of Commerce are working together on, has put that out there as being a way to encourage entrepreneurship in terms of encouraging youth entrepreneurs, mentorship, and those kinds of things. So I think if we work with their partners at the Chambers of Commerce and get it into the school system, and then of course once they create an opportunity for young people to get started, whether it's funding, whether it's facilities, whether it's mentors, having mentors available to them, and I know there's lots of programs out there for entrepreneurs. And then of course we have to support them. We have to buy local. We have to support all of our entrepreneurs, but especially our young entrepreneurs. If sometimes you're driving down the street and you'll see somebody selling a lemonade in front of their house, and you just stop and buy a glass of lemonade. Sometimes it's as simple as that. But I think you can take that to another level. Whether it's I met with young people about a month ago, 2 16-year-old people students in Stratford that are going to cut grass for the summer, and they actually emailed me to meet with me to see if there was anything that the town could do to support, and we have most of that grass cutting covered off, but we'll work with them and support them if we can. There are just a couple of young people who I happen to know, because I have a 16-year-old daughter as well, but they're 2 young people, and just to take the time to meet with them, and who knows, in 10 or 20 years' time, they could be operating a large company here in PEI and providing all kinds of employment. So I think we have to support our entrepreneurs in terms of purchasing goods and services, and government provide the tools that they need to get started sometimes, and just develop the culture, cultivate the idea of being an entrepreneur. I think a lot of people aren't used to being an entrepreneur, or don't grow up in an environment where there's entrepreneurs in their family. And I think if you can kind of get to people and encourage that early in their lives, that it will stay with them as time goes on.
Thank you. Audrey?
I do come from a culture of entrepreneurism in my family and in the province in which I grew up. There's a few things that I have seen here that I've really liked in Eastern Canada, or Atlantic Canada. I was briefly in the town of Sussex, New Brunswick for 1.5 years and worked in the old train station in Sussex. And across the platform there was another little building that sold Sully's ice cream. Has anybody been there? It's pretty amazing. That story came out of a high school project. I'm going to make stories up because I don't know the details, but let's say it was 18 years ago or something, in a life and management, career and life management class through the high school. And it was a grade 11 class where they were to develop an entrepreneurial plan. And a young lad by the last name of Sullivan did develop this ice cream business plan. And I think I heard that his teacher was also his father. There was a good connection there to get it to fruition. The model was that they would open this ice cream store, and only people in grade 11 or 12 could work there, and they had to be students that were going further into college or university. So it became a place to get tuition, and they've had hundreds of kids go through that program now in the many years that it's been operating. So our schools can play a role in entrepreneurship, and I do believe that that's something that is a very good thing to do. Down at Wood Islands, we did a very simple thing. We built a lemonade stand, a cute little thing out of a home hardware planning book, and it's available to all of the people in our area to use it. They just have to book it with me, and they do have to give me a business plan, and it's one pager, and the 11-year-old business plan, the fellow that does the business plan, his is the cutest ever. when they figure out how much the cups will cost them, and they have to extrapolate all of the expenses and figure what the profits will be and what they'll do with the profits is quite grandiose. It's wonderful. So and we take lots of pictures of them, and as Mr. Dunphy says, we do support them and make sure that they get a lot of press and a lot of accolades for it, because they need that. Entrepreneurism does often arise out of a need in the community and passion too. So we have lots of need in lots of places, but it's hard if it's not part of your culture here to grab the bull by the horns and to say, I will create this business to address this need. The government, it would be really nice to have instruments that would help, and as Mr. Dunphy said too, just the fact that there could be a little bit of micro-lending or something like that, and if you can have an opportunity for business plans to be developed for these people who have the great passion and recognize the needs and need and probably have the skills to do the business, but may not have the business skills to do the business plan. So those are some things I think could help.
Thank you. John?
I hope I don't repeat a lot of what you've said, actually, because those are some really great ideas. And I think that at the end of the day, I mean, we should find a way to be championing this mantra of opportunity and not strife. I know that founders get together and we complain about 110-hour weeks and how much we're hustling. And I think that for those of you who aren't, don't let that sort of strike you as something that's odd or something that should be warning your children away from. The 40-hour week is going to be great, and they should just take a job and live in it for as long as they can. The opportunities that I see and the reason that I jump out of bed every morning at 4 a.m. are the reasons that I can't stop working. And when you connect with an opportunity like that, it all just comes together. And so how do we deepen that culture of entrepreneurship? I think establishing that mantra. And I was thinking about this about 6 or 8 months ago, and trying to figure out a way to bring the message of entrepreneurship to maybe a population that comes from a place where looking at what I'm doing could seem hard, and maybe you would want to do something that's easy. And my first thing is, it's not hard. It's easy when you have a direction and an ambition. But also, would you want it to be easy? I look around at the people that I talk to who come from backgrounds. Alicia is a fabulous friend, and lobster fisherman. Okay, that's not easy. Would you want it to be easy? Like, anything that's easy is not worth doing. And I think that if we can get to the point where we can support some sort of de-risking, creating mechanisms, and they don't need to be these massive levers. They can be tiny little levers, but they're going to contribute to a conversation that allow more inputs, that broaden the top of the funnel, that brings more people into something like Startup Zone, which is already there, which is already working and doing an amazing job. And it doesn't need to be a tech company. It can be someone who wants to create, a great tourism opportunity for, agribusiness, for people who just want to come in and see what a modern farm looks like from halfway around the planet because they've never seen a green field, or they've just never been anywhere where there's nothing, because everywhere that they look, there's always something. We need to tell our stories of success, and I think that we also need to ask questions about hardship. I think that deepening the culture it's always easy to get together with friends, and business is always great. Yes, business is great, but if you ask me, what are the 3 things that are challenging you right now, I'd be like, well, where do I start? And I think that maybe there's something I can't help you with, but I'm still waiting for the taxi driver who took me to the airport a couple of months ago, who asked what I did and then listened to me ramble and said, could you build me a website? And I gave him my card. Building a website's like level 1. We're at level 9, but if he calls me and as soon as he gives me his call, we're going to build him a website. And if he makes it to level 9, then we can figure out how we're going to use massively scalable algorithms in the cloud to turn that into tons and tons of money. But that was his hardship, and that was the thing that he put to me, and I'm waiting for his call. And I think that everyone in this room, wherever you're coming from, talk to your kids' friends, ask tough questions. I mean, let's find a way to build a support net, because from everything that innovation is doing, from everything that finance is doing, from everything the province is doing, there's a lot of great things that work traditionally. We just need to open up the top of that funnel just a little bit wider, so that we can get more people to sort of strike a match, and whatever we need to do to light that tinder. I think also too, we also need to be willing to say yes and why, and then help. I get said no to a lot, mostly by venture capitalists, because that's what they do. And even in the entrepreneurial space, it's easy to challenge people. It's always great to do validation and to sort of talk people down, but it should be at least in the very early opportunity, for people who maybe aren't confronted with people who speak as quickly as I do on a daily basis, or who already have the answer to the question that they need to know. It's yes and why. You know, everyone here should be championing that, whether it's with your kids or your friends or your family, or that thing that you've been trying to do in your garage on weeknights, and maybe just get out there and go. So we'll talk at some point, I hope, about what those levers look like, but, you know, what's next? So.
Thank you. And again, I'm going to ask, and I know many of you in this room have significant experience in coaching, mentoring, being entrepreneurs yourself. Do you have anything to add to the conversation on what we can do to deepen our culture of entrepreneurship in Prince Edward Island? And what actions we can take to make that happen?
Actually, my name is Kent Burnell. I run Central Development Corporation, and we run two programs that are of direct interest to you. One is called Young Millionaires, which is kids 8 to 16, and we also run a program for Student Biz, 16 to 24.
Yep.
And the reason I rise to speak, or sit to speak, pardon me, is what John said. We've had, this is the 25th year of Young Millionaires. It's always oversubscribed. And the one problem we have is people making phone calls to the busy people they want to talk to and getting a no. And I understand the no. The no is because I have so much more to do. So I guess if I would implore this room would be to try to get a yes, especially with younger entrepreneurs, because of course they're fulfilling you as well as fulfilling themselves.
Thank you very much. And that speaks to our earlier panel discussion too on retention, population, employment. All of these things are relevant to those conversations as well. Does anybody else have anything to add? Come on, you guys. No? Okay. Something else we're going to talk about in developing place and growth is infrastructure opportunities for the future. And again, from my perspective in downtown Summerside, something I'd really like to see is a little bit more attention on developing the vacancies and the existing infrastructure opportunities that we have versus building new. Somewhat of a jaded bias in that conversation. But there are other opportunities, and what infrastructure opportunities are we going to need to see as we go forward growing our places in the future? And this time I'll start with John.
Ooh, I don't even have time to take notes. This is great. I think I said a little bit before, I think it's all about connections. I think that there's a couple big ones. I'll get back to fiber in a second. I travel way too much. I'm on the road. Last year it was almost 300 days outside of the country. None of our clients are in Canada. Actually, that's a lie. We're engaging with our first Canadian one next week. But in the middle of January, 3 flights a day does not really help me, because I also know 25 people on the plane, because we're always the same guys on the same plane, and if there were more planes, then we'd be getting on more planes probably. I think that, and I'll continue shouting at Air Canada and Fly PEI, I don't know how we do this, I don't know how we get more people, but there's a very virtuous cycle of you put more planes in, and then they fill them because it's cheaper, so they put more planes in. Moncton did it when I was moved back to the Atlantic Canada and Moncton in late 2013, and they started flying Q400s in, and they were like, we'll throw 11 planes at it, and we'll never fill them. 3 months later, they filled them, and then they kept filling them, and they just keep filling them. That is a huge problem that I face directly. But to go back to connectivity, I think that I'm a Rogers customer because it's better internationally. It's terrible on the island. I probably should be with Bell. But talking to all these people, I think we need to get connectivity up there. It's easy to live downtown and have gigabit fiber, and then walk up to the ATC and have gigabit fiber. And I'm probably making a lot of enemies in this room right now. I know it's not easy, but we should probably hold someone's feet to the fire at corporate, whoever needs to do it, and just run fiber. It's ultimately scalable. It's going to continue to scale like copper has for the past 100 years. It would allow me to infinitely scale my business. I wouldn't have to be worrying about not hiring 6 people that I need to hire right now because I can't get into the office space I want to get into right now to get more desks that I can fill with bodies, because they can just work from home. And I know that the friends that I talk to who have their own startups in the Valley and in Vancouver and in Toronto are literally looking at me and saying, you have gigabit fiber for $120 that you get in your apartment? Why would you ever leave? Like, they're looking at moving their company here just for that fact. So I don't know. I could talk about a lot of other stuff, but from my perspective, how much money does it take to build a building that's got great connectivity? How much does it cost just to bring that connectivity to everyone so that it's not just high tech? We're growing all of those opportunities like I talked about, online stores, direct communication, daily drop shipping, overnight lobster delivery, all of these things that everyone else is already doing, and it's just that tiny little friction point that makes that effortless. If we can take the friction out of the buying process of everything we do, everyone, just sales explode everywhere, and getting people on that same latency, that headway, key. So,
Thank you. Audrey?
Infrastructure, and Summerside is looking to reuse what's available there. That's your
Yes.
your plan. Yeah,
We're hoping.
Certainly, we look at that out in Belfast too, because our school was underutilized, so there's a few spaces in there that we ought to be using. We do get into a bit of problem with what can go in the school, because there's always the stranger danger issue of putting public spaces into a elementary school. So we have to be clear about what kinds of relationships we can have going into that building. We do have an awful lot of farmhouses in our area that are I don't know if they're abandoned, but they're often not used. And I can't tell you where all of those people are, if they've just speculated and kept the farmhouses, or if they're just Americans that have inherited them, or whatever. But we do need young people to move back to our communities. So the Belfast Development Corporation has been looking at a Build Belfast plan to return people to Belfast. Whether or not it gets into any of those old houses, we're not certain. We do believe that there should be fluidity of purpose in our buildings, and that we need to watch that stuff. When you're doing development, right now we've had a certain amount of development in Belfast, but it's static, and it's just there, and now we have to revisit it. And to revisit it, we have to look at diversity and grow it. And then it's there, and it's becomes static and generalized again, and then we have to revisit it. So this process never stops development, because we always tend naturally to become more generalized, and the diversification and development needs to always be revisited. So fluidity of purpose for all of our buildings is something that we should look at. The Croft House that the Belfast Historical Society has right now, it's too small for us. We have to move all of our museum pieces aside to have a meeting there. So we're looking at something else. And in fact, we are looking at some new infrastructure, because we've acquired a fairly large art collection of 54 artistic pieces, original art, and I like to think it's PEI's Maud Lewis. We'll see. And we need a place to put that. So we do need a new building that we would like to dedicate as an arts and cultural center, and within that space have an incubation place for visioning, because we're back to the visioning and leadership of Selkirk. So that would be the focus of that building. The other reason I think that we need a new building is that we are a number of chain communities, as I said, from Werwell Cove all the way to Little Sands, and we don't have a main street, or we don't have a downtown that you can go to, and we feel that for gathering and sharing ideas and communing over food, we need a central space, a hub or a heart of this larger regionalized community now. Insofar as infrastructure goes, we do have another little thing that we're looking at. We are, for new people that sign on to Big Belfast, looking at a couple of guiding principles that we hope that in new builds that they will consider the environment to be very important, and that's where we want to focus the model for environmental building on the island. And we are also going to introduce a few architectural controls, not in the negative way that it might have sounded there, but we want to, in our brand, focus on the old Scottish Croft House, but revisit that style of housing, and then thoroughly modernize it with environmental facilities and aspects and technology aspects, so that it's thoroughly modern. So new builds, we're going to, and if they've signed on with us, we're going to ask them to look at that kind of infrastructure being built. Beauty is important to us. We do have a person in this Big Belfast plan who is looking at developing a new mini home for islanders, one that doesn't look so much like a trailer, because, and I don't mean that in any kind of elitist way, but we do have a tourism product here to sell our beautiful province. And the fellow that's looking at manufacturing new mini homes with a PEI look, a higher pitched roof, etc., he's gung-ho to do that. And at this point, he's thinking it might come in a kit where you can, you know, it's all on pallets, and you and your brothers and uncles can put it together. So that's his kind of idea, and it'll have a PEI look. We do need spaces for gathering and interaction. We need to do that for reducing isolation and community dissonance. And we do want everything in our new Big Belfast, the new development, to be quite signature looking. Beauty excellence, themed, and promoting our unique and significant history. So infrastructure is a big part of what we're doing.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. I'm going to remind John that my day job is I work for Eastlink. Just
it didn't fall on deaf ears, is what you're saying.
no. But I said before I say that, I better just double check my cell phone, and it is getting LTE service here. So then I thought, well, no one likes to get their feet held to the fire, so maybe I'll just let that all drop. But having said that, internet, what John's saying is absolutely correct. Access to broadband is critical to the success, in terms of infrastructure, to the success of any area, any location, whether it's PEI, whether it's Ontario or BC or the North. And so obviously, if it was easy, it would have already been done. Of course, it's not easy. So I think, but that's a focus, and I know the province is doing a lot of great work in that area right now to try to provide high-speed internet to rural PEI. And because I feel that internet is like what the electricity was in the 60s. It's critical to the success, whether you're in school, whether you're owning your own business, or you just want to live day to day, whether you're retired, you need internet access. You need to be connected to the world. And that connection to the world, I believe technology is going to be the critical part of driving our economy in the next number of years. Someone like John, if you'd asked somebody 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, 5 years ago, what would you perceive to have that kind of, with John's company, or that kind of a job? And those jobs weren't there 10 years ago. So similarly, in 10 years' time, the jobs that are going to be there in 10 years' time don't exist currently. So I think we have to focus on the technology and the technology that we have available to us, and sort of drive that technology. And that technology, entrepreneurs like John are going to utilize that technology and become successful business people and employers. Existing businesses, obviously, whether you're farming potatoes or building bulk boxes or making cupboards. My brother is an entrepreneur in Morel, and he builds cupboards. And just recently, in the last, say, 5 years, he initiated implemented a computer-based tool that helps him make his cupboards. It's all computer-based, and his son's actually doing training across the country on that, using that tool, that technology. So I know it was announced last week, Rolla Bay Farms, Keenan's in Surrey, is using more technology to make their products to provide better quality products for the marketplace. So technology, investments in technology is going to drive the economy. It's going to make businesses more competitive. It's going to give them an advantage. And if they don't invest in technology, they're going to be at a disadvantage. So I think technology is a big one. And of course, technology is a great equalizer. I mean, if you're in rural PEI, you don't have to be, as John said, you don't have to be in Toronto or Halifax or Vancouver or New York City. You can be in rural small town PEI as long as you've got access to internet and you've got a workforce to draw from. You can be successful. And so I think, as I said, the rural PEI, infrastructure in broadband, province is working towards that, I know, and as well, it allows businesses and entrepreneurs to exist in rural PEI, which will hopefully, we'll talk about population here later. So.
Actually, if I could just jump in, and I know we've been talking about technology a lot, and I promise that's probably the last I'll mention it. You asked me first. I didn't have any time to prep. From an infrastructure perspective, I think something we should consider too. I know that I'm obviously very urban-centric. I'm all for urbanism. I'm all for densifying Charlottetown, or at least sort of improving that, but not to the detriment of rural PEI. PEI is obviously already the densest province by 40% over the next nearest, and so I think that by focusing on that, I've neglected to say I also do believe in building out regional centers throughout rural PEI, and they sort of work in tandem. Something I have noticed, though, is I've got a car. I don't like driving it. I mostly just drive to the airport or across the bridge to Moncton Airport if I can't get out of this airport. But would either love to take a bus that I don't have to wait in Amherst at a gas station for, or would love to be able to go up west and sit on a bus and not have to drive. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who would love to commute in on and not have to drive themselves and get 30 minutes to read a book or catch up on work or sleep. So I think that there also are some opportunities there. Even though we are a small island, there's a lot of people who are commuting into town or even just trying to get in across the island. And as the population ages, I think something to definitely consider is either improved shuttle service or community transit that does function more frequently on a more regular schedule to support mobility across the province, because it will just continue to make it easier to not have to either move mom into a nursing home or put her in town or move her into the flat upstairs and at home with you. So she's lovely, I'm sure. So I also do think that transit. I think that the technology that's available to us, especially you no longer need this massive groundswell of technology to implement a lot of this stuff, because there's little communities like Orillia, Ontario, who are using Uber to manage all of their bus fleets, so their shuttle services, instead of having to build a schedule and run empty buses. So lots of stuff like that.
Thank you so much. We have a question?
With Cavendish Farm. Can you hear me? So, talk about infrastructure. I think you hit it right on the nail there as far as the island. When we look at the future, infrastructure is critical in order for the island to drive its economy. The Premier talks about sense of place and the island way of life. I think there's got to be a balance. How do we find the right infrastructure and also keeping the island way of life so everybody can feel the importance of the island? And as we all know, we talk about people living here, it's the island way of life. But I think there's a call out here with businesses in terms of different sectors. We heard John talk about fiber, the critical to his. Well, we know in our business, in the potato business, the agricultural business, there's a need for our growers to have access to the right infrastructure to allow them to fulfill their needs of having successful farms here on Prince Edward Island. And I think that the government, in terms of providing leadership and vision to put in place the infrastructure to allow the agricultural community, which is a big part of the market here, to thrive, is required. And I think the government here today asking input from industry and business, and I think this is a big need here, is do we have the right infrastructure to allow our sectors to continue to expand, to continue to invest in Prince Edward Island and continue to grow here. So I just like to reinforce the call out here on infrastructure is critical.
Thank you very much. Do you want a mic?
Hi, Brad Rivers. I'm the MLA for District 18 Russell Granville. First of all, welcome everyone here to beautiful Stanley Bridge. It's great to see you here. Of course, this is I like to think of District 18 as one of the economic engines of the island. So it's great to have you all here today. But I like this conversation and this way it's going. I mean, John, I've brought up now a couple of times and various people about high-speed internet and how important it is. I know Minister McDonald has heard me talk about this to nauseam, and I know he's looking into it. I wanted to comment that I think in terms of building infrastructure to house businesses, I think we're going to see more and more people working out of their homes, and having their garage or their warehouse right there. I think that when it comes to telecommuting, you can actually reduce the amount of space needed for the brick and mortar business. When people are working, 3 days or more at their home, and they just have that desk space that's in the brick and mortar office that is rotating. You come in, you plug in, and you get it. On the high-speed internet front, I mean, I'm actually a web developer by trade, and I had to wait until 2010 before I could work out of my home when which I wanted to do so I could be near my young family. Up until that point, I was actually a contractor with Deltaware, Maximus, so that was fine, but commuting to Summerside, put my time in there and coming back home, I didn't want to do. So when that came, it enabled me to actually not only run my own business, but reach out to off-island and export my services, right? And so I have clients even today, and my wife was really taking over the business, but we're working, New Brunswick and Manitoba and Alberta and as far away as California. And these are people who we haven't even met because we work with them over the internet. Now, in terms of providing high-speed internet to the island, and I know, again, the government's working on this, I think we need a combination probably of fiber. I mean, I would love to see fiber go to every doorstep. I agree. There's a huge cost. We talked with Eastlink and with Bell and looked at those, but I think a combination of wireless and fiber is going to make things happen. There's ExploreNet that's rolling out this summer and into the end of the year, which is going to be great. And kudos to the government for making that happen. But as well, we've got companies like Wicked A Wi-Fi who are trying to do that. A great local company, and their business model is really, really neat because when you purchase, your high-speed internet package, and they say they're going to go to that 25 megabits per second, up and down. When you purchase it for your home internet, they're going to make it so that wherever you are on the island, if you're connecting through their wireless tower, you have high-speed internet. It's not like I'm connected at home and then I go to Stanley Bridge and I got to find that wireless connection here. And once and the cost, of course, putting in that wireless infrastructure is a lot less than the private. So I just wanted to bring that up. And lastly, on the infrastructure front, one of the things that came up in the recent education discussions and school review was the hub school model. And we've seen some schools doing that already. For example, in St. Peter's, that school was actually closed, and now it's being used. And of course, it has high-speed internet there because the government already put in the money to bring high-speed internet to all the schools. And companies like Bohemian Finance, right? They started in the basement, and then they were able to grow into that infrastructure. And I like what you said about using our existing infrastructure. So I just wanted to add that to this.
Thank you. On that note, if any other comments from our group on sustainability, creating stronger places, growing our great spaces and communities? Any further comments from the question? From the panel? No? So, having said all that and all the great information that you guys are presented with today, if you could take the opportunity to put together some thoughts on all that you've heard from both panels and provide them to your local representatives so that the government can move forward and action some of the things that they heard today. And it also provides some accountability for all of us to participate in the process. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to our panel.
So thank you, Pam, and to John, Audrey, and David for that panel. And what we're going to do now is invite Tim and Elizabeth and Michael to switch places with you and come to the front and offer some comments on behalf of the Board of Economic Advisors. And good. And this will run us half an hour. We'll see. There may be some interaction. Let's plan on by 12:30 being in a position to have a bite of lunch and another chance to get some money in circulation out here in Big Stanley Bridge. So that's all good, and of course spends more time together. But we'll start. I'll invite Tim to chair this session. Thanks.
Okay. So I live in Cape Traverse. Having moved there, built a house there with my wife in 2005, moved there full-time in 2007. Having come back, actually, because I spent 4 years at UPEI in the early 70s. I know I don't look that old, but that's the case. Our daughter was born on the island. Our son-in-law grew up on the island, and they now both live in Charlottetown. So a lot of island connections here. I wanted to make a couple of comments about what we heard this morning and then turn it over to my colleagues. I've got about 4 pages of notes, but I won't obviously refer to those. Let me start with the Premier's opening comments. We have, as a Board of Economic Advisors, been very supportive of and now in a position to compliment the government for its achievement of a balanced budget and the fiscal discipline that led them to that. It's not an end in itself, but if you can, during strong economic times, given the growth numbers that the Premier referred to, if you can achieve a surplus during those periods, it gives you the opportunity to deal with the inevitable periods when the economy isn't doing as well. And it won't just be PEI. All of us in this room are old enough, I think, I don't see anybody under 15, to remember the recession of 8 or 9 years ago. That kind of potential for a downturn, whether it's in the resource industries or the economy more generally, is always present, and it's useful for a government to be in a position to deal with the consequences of that. Even if it's not a conscious policy decision about spending money, it's at least dealing with the impact of that on revenue growth. So I think achieving that balance is positive, not just for now, but for the future. We have talked often with the Premier and his colleagues about the role of population growth, making the point that it has to be conjoined with and probably depends very critically upon economic growth. And so it's not surprising that you see the kind of population growth that we've seen in PEI, given the numbers that he referred to on both income growth, job growth, and productivity growth. The latter is really critical for growing incomes. It's the sine qua non of income growth, sort of average income growth. And it's interesting for those who are concerned about productivity growth being negative for jobs. In fact, if you look at the sheets that you were given, the productivity growth had, coincident with it, fairly strong employment growth. They are not substitutes for each other. They can be very much complementary. That's what we'll give you some other comments later, Premier, on that and other issues. On the panels, a couple of things I wanted to note. There is a lot of discussion in attempting to spur economic development about selling or marketing an area and its quality of life. Sometimes the challenge with that is that everybody's doing exactly the same thing. That is to say, they're selling quality of life. I rather like better the term that I heard from the Premier and from the panelists, which is that sense of place. That's a very different way of thinking about it, because what you're saying is there are things that are unique about this particular area. There are things that are similar to many other areas. But I've forgotten who it was that said, we don't try to tell people a story that isn't true. In other words, we say, this is not Edmonton, this is not Calgary, this is not Toronto, it's not New York City, it is Prince Edward Island. And here are all its features. You know in advance what you're getting, and either that is attractive or it's not attractive. And the point is that different individuals, whether they are people bringing skills or people bringing investment dollars, will have widely diverse preferences about place and the diversity of opportunities. Some of them will be attracted here, some of them won't. The key, and I think I heard this in the discussion on that first panel about recruitment, is making sure that you're looking for the skills that match what you, for the jobs you require to fill, but in that process, looking at the characteristics of and the potential for, if I can put it this way, integration and therefore retention with what's available in Prince Edward Island. And I think that's a chore that is probably best done by those who are actually in the job of recruiting people. Governments can provide lots of interesting information, but only the person in the HR department or the hiring group or whatever it is knows what that firm needs now and what it might need 10 years from now or 5 years from now or 3 years from now, and can recruit on that basis. I like the idea of the buddy system, by the way, and I've forgotten, because I didn't make a note of it, who mentioned they're using that. And the other is, because my wife always says, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. In this case, when you're recruiting, if the kids aren't happy, they're not staying. I think that was the message I heard. The need to anticipate, and this came up in both the first and second panels, what the needs are going to be 5 years from now, maybe even as far out as 10 years from now. And the problem, of course, is we don't know what technology will bring, as the second panel referred to on several occasions. So what you want, obviously, are both people and structures, institutional structures and others, that are adaptable. Knowing that people will, as was referred to, will change their career orientation several times before they finally, as I have, get to semi-retirement. Understanding that, the focus then isn't usually on very specific skills, it's on that broader range of abilities that are adaptable. So the company is adaptable, but the people who work at that company are adaptable too to the changes that are possible. We heard from that first panel something that at least I found very interesting and helpful, and that is thoughtful employers who, in their recruitment process, are thinking not just about the position that needs to be filled, but what will happen to the people that they hire to fill the job. And that's whether it's a buddy system or some other structure that's put in place to deal with that, I think is important. There are a bunch of other comments I could make, but I won't at this point. From the second panel, my first and most important takeaway is, because I live in Cape Traverse and get 0.75 megabytes per second, I have a very strong level of support and enthusiasm for broader fiber optic availability. I did move to Internet Hub and was excited to get all the way up to 6 megabytes a second, and that was, anyway, I won't dwell on that one. In the conversation, a couple of other points. There were very little reference this morning. There was a bit in the Premier's commentary and from a couple of people. But let me link two ideas. The role of looking externally for markets. And that may come, in some cases, from having people come here who already have that outside exposure. It may come from people who come back and having gained those that skills and that exposure. But it's critically important, I think, if you're in a relatively small economy, that is to say, an economy with a small population base, that you look well beyond the local area or the province or even the region for your markets. And John, I think you were saying all of your markets are external. You finally got a Canadian, is it a Canadian or a regional? So a regional customer. That I think is very important in a small open economy, to be looking at those opportunities, and was very pleased to hear about that. One last comment. I mean, there are a bunch of others, but one last one. My daughter and I were talking a couple of days ago, and she said she's a family doctor and has had on occasion to inform patients of hers that she will be advising the the transportation folks that this individual will no longer be able to have a driver's license, and about the anger that is associated with that. And she said, you know what's going to happen? We're going to have electric cars a lot faster. And I said, why do you think that? She said, because you people your age, are going to demand it. That's the only way you'll be able to be mobile, whether it's here or anywhere else. So it won't be the 35-year-olds that are be pushing for electric cars. It'll be the 70-year-olds who will be pushing for electric cars. Maybe we'll get Uberized in PEI before that. I'm not sure of that, but it's. I think the what we've heard in this and other sessions is and as a board of economic advisors is extremely helpful, and that is we hear the ideas that are diverse. We hear the commitment to economic growth, not in writ large for the province. It's really how my company will grow, how the people who are employed in my company will grow with us, how we will adapt to changing circumstances. The dynamism of that I find both very encouraging and very enlightening. When I used to, for a career, do a lot of presentations of forecasts, I found that the most valuable part of those events was the opportunity to talk with people afterwards and find out what they were doing and what they were doing differently than others were doing. That kind of idea development, that kind of entrepreneurial dynamism is critically important, and it can come from people who were born and raised here. It can come from people who didn't see PEI ever in their lives until they showed up to become a fisher of lobsters. Or not, that was how quickly Alicia's husband took on that job. But it can come in both ways. I think it's very helpful if an economy or a society that has long been traditional, and I lived here in the early 70s, so I know, and I grew up in Cape Breton, and I worked in Halifax, so I know about traditional ways of doing things. That interaction of local entrepreneurial and other kinds of thinking, combined with the impact of different ways of looking at the world because you've come from somewhere else, I think is a really important part of the diversity that we're seeing. It's not just people with different backgrounds. It's that sometimes clash, often commingling of ideas and approaches and ways of thinking about the world that might not have been there had we not had both of those groups, both those who are grown up and educated here and those who are coming from outside to spur different ways of looking at the world. So I found that reflected in the panels this morning, but see it often in the just going around the island, going to other parts of the country. So sorry, I took a bit too long for that. Any thoughts that you have,
Okay.
Elizabeth?
Well, thank you, Tim. You've covered, I think, the range, so I can be selective now.
Please.
That's good. So first of all, I'm very pleased to be here. It was a great couple of panels and great ideas. I've worked as an economist in Atlantic Canada throughout my working life, and I guess I still am working as one. I guess I haven't given that up entirely, but including frequently here with on PEI, and it is very encouraging to see the island economy make steady improvements. So not enormous improvements, but steady improvements in growth, in the diversity of its economy, in just the role of entrepreneurship, and its willingness to now think of the island economy as being fully open. I mean, it has always been a trading economy, but the attitudes are changing with respect to the need for connectivity across to other places beyond the island, and the openness and willingness to experiment and try new things. In other words, every idea that we have here on the island doesn't just need to be exploited on the island. Maybe it's good for those to go elsewhere and then bring the ideas back in. So that kind of willingness to, in part, I think it reflects the fact that the heavy hand of government, which was always designed to help the island economy, also kept things a little pushed down at times. So we're kind of lifting off some of that, and I think that's extremely positive and extremely encouraging. The things that I thought about coming out of the island, first of all, the importance of the small but steady improvements that we're seeing on productivity and how linked they are, first of all, into technology and the willingness to exploit technology across all diversified areas of the economy. And this is not just, for John's area firms. This is broad-based now in terms of where we go with this. But we also need to think of it in terms of our ability to generate more wealth in the economy. And we shouldn't be ashamed to talk about wealth. If you think, what I'd like to see 5 years of now ahead for PEI economy is a broader range of mid-sized companies who are able to, and entrepreneurs who are able to generate that wealth to reinvest back into the economy. And we're already seeing some of that in the startup zone, for example. But that is what is important. That's going to be a big driver of growth. We can't really think that we'll have a supportive hand of government always there in terms of big flows of revenue that came into, or government revenues spending that came into PEI's economy in the 60s and 70s. That era is gone. So we really need to think more creatively about, where the private sector is going to be in terms of driving growth. So to me, wealth creation, we're always a bit ashamed to talk about that in Atlantic Canada. We've got to keep it down, but we've got to think about, where we go on that front. To me, that's very important in terms of how we support the next round of entrepreneurs. And I just think of DP, Alex was on the panel for DP Murphy, and they're a great example of a company that's grown here from a base but also managed to expand significantly outside of the island economy. But a lot of that wealth is coming back here, and those ideas are coming back here to PEI. So to me, that's very important. The couple of challenges I thought to throw out are, are employers really getting the message fully on the importance of a diverse workforce and on changing the patterns of work and support for employees to really allow that to happen. So Susan in the first panel, I think, voiced this very well. You're not just providing a job anymore, you're providing all sorts of additional thinking in terms of what you need to do to support your employees. And I was in rural Manitoba, small town, at the end of last week. One long-established employer that would pull from a large area around rural southwestern Manitoba. And over time, their labor force has grown to be largely female. And what I was amazed by in talking to many of these young women employees, how many of them had 3 and up children. And I said, well, did you take a break? Oh, no. We kept working. We've just had maternity leaves. But the employer has to have flexible work hours because, as they said, there's a flood out of the office at 4 o'clock, right when the schools end. And but the employer is also doing things like, though, if you're part of our labor force, you're back in for all our training programs. Just because you're off on maternity leave, you're not out of the workforce. You're back in, being fully upgraded and given access to training. And they're all delighted that maternity benefits have been extended to 18 months because, of course, that's the gap to get your child into child care. And but the companies had to respond by doing some kind of top-up because, of course, it doesn't increase the amount of money you get. It only spreads it out over a longer period of time. So I thought this was a great example of how a company can respond to the fact that conditions have changed significantly for them. And that's, so our company's really getting the message that that's what you need to do now if you're going to really, fully make this work for you. But the other challenge I'll think about is whether young people on the island are really also getting the message here that maybe there's more opportunities than they might have thought, or are well-educated young people still thinking, I still need to get off island right away if I'm going to succeed in my career. This is not just an issue, of course, for Prince Edward Island. This is for many parts of Canada, as the flood of young people has consolidated into large urban areas. But can we start to change that debate around improved connectivity and how it encourages young people to think differently about where opportunities might be? Just the challenge on young people now finding adequate housing, the costs of commuting time if you've got a small family. I was thinking about this example from from Manitoba, where the daycare was only 100 yards from the employment base versus, I've got to spend 2 hours in my car commuting to get around Toronto or Vancouver to, pick up kids. The improvements in lifestyle that greater connectivity and access, or those living in smaller places can have, is really very important in terms of lifestyle of young families, in terms of how we want to encourage that to happen. So my last comment is that even though I'm mostly preoccupied with young people, I would say don't give up on those of us who are falling off the line. That's just because we're 65 and older doesn't mean we're still not working. We are hopefully making a productive contribution. So I think we need to, we need to stop that age range at 65. Don't you think we should push it out a little? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And Tim and Elizabeth, I basically, I think I agreed with everything you said, so I can be even more selective in my comments. First of all, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Mike Horgan, and I'm currently a senior advisor in a law firm, although my background is as an economist, and I live in Ottawa. And I really had a 36-year-long career in the federal public service, including 4 years as the president of ACOA, living in Moncton. And I ended my career I was 5 years as the federal deputy minister of finance. You might ask, well, what's my connection to the island? The connection is that my parents were from Prince Edward Island. My father grew up in Stanhope, my mother in Charlottetown. And if I can tell a story out of school, my father was a school teacher, and he taught the Premier's father in the one-room schoolhouse in Stanhope for a period of time. My father left the island for work, and I was born shortly after my parents left in the Lac-Saint-Jean region of Quebec, and I grew up basically in rural Quebec, and then eventually we made our way to Montreal. We came every summer because, of course, my dad being a school teacher, he had the summer off, and so we came to PEI every summer, and we had a cottage on the island. When I started university in Montreal, my parents moved back to PEI and reestablished themselves in Charlottetown. In terms of the panels, let me say I found the discussion this morning really interesting and fascinating. And the one concept that really struck me was Big Belfast on the mighty island. That's what a great concept. I think, I'll just make a couple of comments on the panels. One, I think, the island has a tremendous advantage. Small is beautiful, but small is also a kind of size where you can actually do a lot because you know each other. You can collaborate, the collaboration, the kind of, the ability to be agile. I think being small in a way helps all those kinds of things. So I think you've got a kind of an advantage, if you will, sometimes in your size. I like the concept that people mentioned about kind of less talk, more doing, and I think in a smaller community, the actual ability to move from talk to doing, I think, the possibilities are greater. I also like the concept that came up in the first panel, and I think it was sort of reiterated in the second panel as well, that I think it's important for the island to sell its success stories. I mean, I think there's nothing like success that to breed interest and to breed more success. So I think that's a really important concept. On the infrastructure side, I mean, I'll just give you a story. We were having dinner with the Premier last night. I was coming from Ottawa. The only way, really, I could make it in time for that was to fly to Moncton and come over from Moncton. I couldn't do it. You know, I could get to the island later, but not in time for dinner. So I think, you know, the sort of air transportation connectivity, I think it's probably better in the summertime when Air Canada puts on more flights for tourists and stuff like that. But that's really, I think, you know, an important aspect of infrastructure for the island and part of the future. I also agree with the comments with respect to connectivity. If you look at the, you know, the technological change that's taking place and the economy of the future. I mean, if you're not connected with the proper kind of broadband infrastructure, then you know, I think you're condemning yourselves to always being a little bit behind the eight ball. So I think that's really important. I guess two final comments I'd make, and one was I was really struck by the comment from the first panel. You know, the province's growth is really going to have to come from population growth. Is really going to have to come from immigration, and I think it's critically important, therefore, for the island to think about how it integrates newcomers, welcomes newcomers into the community, and oftentimes these are going to be newcomers from, you know, very different parts of the world and very different cultures, and I think it's going to be important to pay attention to that. And then finally, I was going to make this comment, but Elizabeth made it too. You know, I read quickly the document on population action plan for the island. You know, your fastest growing part of the population is actually, you know, your elderly population. And so I think, and I didn't see it in the document, although maybe it is there, I think one of the things that you should probably pay attention to is how do you extend the working life of people who are in their 60s and early 70s, who've had a lot of experience. They're healthier than they were when you were 60 or 70, 30 years ago. So this is a kind of an area I think that deserves a lot more attention in terms of keeping older people more active and in the workforce longer. Thank you.
Thank you to Michael and Elizabeth and Tim for those comments. And the board has the convention now of preparing a letter back to government based on these discussions, as well as further discussions that we will have in working sessions with them this afternoon. Their letter following on the time that we had together in November is online at GovPE, that you're welcome to see and see the benefit and the rigor that comes with these interactions. And there will be a further letter from this session today, so a way of continuing the dialogue and building in a further element of accountability and transparency to this discussion that we'll have here. Everything that we did here this morning has been live streamed and will be available to review if you want to have another look at it or to recommend it to friends. The other thing I'd encourage everyone to have in mind is the challenge or invitation that I mentioned earlier, and that is to think about whether you or someone that may not be here but would be well suited to make a contribution would be willing to put your name forward or have someone else put their names forward for the regional economic advisory councils. There will be 5 to 7 people on each of those councils, and as I mentioned, the 4 chairs have already been named, and I'm sure that everyone can see from the caliber and the leadership that those chairs bring to the task that we mean business with the advisory councils and are indeed looking to capture the kind of input and experience and perspective and dialogue and diversity that we had the chance to take part in here today. At that point, I invite everyone to stay on for a bite of lunch and to go back to a point I made earlier, just in case you didn't think Montgomery was right about the emerald, ruby, and sapphire. Look out the window. Anyway, thanks for being here. It's been a very, very good, productive session, and I think it encourages all of us to believe that we do have and can strive even further for the mighty island. Thanks, everyone.